Shri Krishna Sharanam Mama. 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 बोलिए श्री कृष्णचंद्र भगवान की जय। सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय। कृष्ण मुरारी जय कृष्ण मुरारी। 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 मुरलीधर पीतांबरधारी। मुरलीधर पीतांबरधारी। मुरलीधर पीतांबरधारी। मुरलीधर पीतांबरधारी। माई मीरा प्रभु गिरिधारी। 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 कृष्ण मुरारी जय कृष्ण मुरारी। 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 वृंदावन गोवर्धन धारी। वृंदावन गोवर्धन धारी। वृंदावन गोवर्धन धारी। वृंदावन गोवर्धन धारी। सूरदास के हृदय विहारी। 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 कृष्ण मुरारी जय कृष्ण मुरारी। कृष्ण मुरारी जय कृष्ण मुरारी। कृष्ण मुरारी जय कृष्ण मुरारी। कृष्ण मुरारी जय कृष्ण मुरलीधर पीताम्बरधारी मुरलीधर पीताम्बरधारी माई मीरा प्रभु गिरिधारी माई मीरा प्रभु गिरिधारी कृष्ण मुरारी जय कृष्ण मुरारी वृंदावन गोवर्धन धारी वृंदावन गोवर्धन धारी सूरदास के हृदय विहारी 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 कृष्ण मुरारी जय कृष्ण मुरारी 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 कृष्ण मुरारी जय कृष्ण मुरारी। बोलिए वृंदावन बिहारी लाल की गिरिराज धरण की बोलो भाई सब संतन की सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की आज के आनंद की हरे राम 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 सीता राम 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 हरे राम 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 सीता राम राम राम।
Hari Om everyone. Can you all hear me clearly? Awesome. So we will begin with the invocation and Hari Chaitanya will lead with the invocation and the two shlokas. Then Divya Chaitanya, no, Brahmacharini Divya will give the meaning. Then Brahmachari Hari Chaitanya will do his bit. Then I'll sum it up at the end. So let's begin. Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahavidyankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Tapodikshina papanam shantanam vitaraginam mumukshunam apekshoyam ātmabodho vidhīyate. 31 and 32. āvidyakaṃ śarīrādi
āvidyakaṃ śarīrādi
dṛśyaṃ budbudavatkṣaram
dṛśyaṃ budbudavatkṣaram
etadvilakṣaṇaṃ
etadvilakṣaṇaṃ vidyāt
aham brahmeti nirmalam
aham brahmeti nirmalam
dehānyatvānna me janma
dehānyatvānna me janma
janmajarākārśyalayādayaḥ
janmajarākārśyalayādayaḥ
śabdādiviṣayaiḥ saṅgah
śabdādiviṣayaiḥ saṅgah
nirindriyatayā naca.
nirindriyatayā naca. Thank you, Hari.
Hariom, can you hear me well?
Yep.
Okay. So in the previous verses, it almost seems like we've reached a sort of crescendo in the teachings, that the Atman is the illumination itself. No other knowledge is needed to know it. That all we need to do is negate all that is unreal and come to understand the aikyam declared by the Mahavakyas, right? It's the ultimate message from our Shastras. But when we look at our book, we're only halfway through. So where are we going next? So we are going to be revisiting all the topics that we've seen earlier, but each time we're going to dig a little bit deeper in our vichara to really hammer in the vakyas of our shrutis into our thick heads, right? Until it has a resonating impact. And we know it has a resonating impact when that vichara becomes true vairagya, which can be seen through our actions and our words. But most importantly, it is our own understanding of ourselves, right? That vairagya has to be a true vairagya. So in this verse, āvidyakaṃ śarīrādi. So and I put up the BMI chart here for us to look at while we see this verse, is when we look at all of the layers, starting from the OET, PFT, BMI, all the way up to the vasanas, all of these are observable objects, and they are all seen. If they are seen, then they are perishable. And the example that's given is, again, budbudavatkṣaram, right? Perishable like the bubbles. We saw the analogy of the bubbles in verse 8. And there it was saying that the jagat rises, exists, and perishes, just like the bubble arises, exists, and perishes in water. So that impermanency is what's indicated again. And just imagine like a bubble, right? How temporary, how fragile its existence is. It takes very little for that bubble to pop. It is that with that kind of delicacy and that impermanence where all of these layers are like that. So we've seen in our Shastras that there are different permutations in describing ourselves. We see the three bodies, or the body, mind, and so we can see it as gross, subtle, or causal body. We see the body, mind, or intellect. And we even dig into the intellect, which is the most important, as the manas, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. All of these layers, in one way or the other, have limitations. If it's the body, it is not the mind. If it's not the mind, it is not the intellect, in that way. And when we look at the three states, the waker ends when the dreamer starts, and the dreamer starts when the sleeper begins. So in some form or the other, there is some sort of limitation to it. As soon as it's a limited entity, it becomes a dṛśya, a seen entity. And so we have to, and Gurudev always says, dṛśyaṃ, like they go hand in hand. If it is seen, it is perishable. Then what is Brahman? Etadvilakṣaṇaṃ. It is different from all of these. Vidya, to know this. So what is not an object? It must be the subject. So if it's not a dṛśya, it is a drashta. And if it's not kṣara, it's akṣara, the imperishable, permanent subject. So it is like the water instead of the bubble. And oftentimes we can develop a misconception when we're told this, that it is not dṛśya, it is drashta. Then are you just pointing from one object to another? It's not the rope, it's a snake. Oh, sorry, it's not the snake, it's a rope. Are we just pointing from one object to the other? That is why in the last pada it says aham brahma iti nirmalam, that it is the teacher says, no, it's not there, it's you. Aham brahma. Drashta is not another object. It is your very own subject with the capital S. And so it's important to remember that even when we use words belong to the world of objects. And therefore the words always leave this impression that anything I'm trying to describe is an object. So especially when we try to indicate Brahman, the self, the subject, it's hard to do with words because its very nature is to objectify the subject, right? So there's a difficulty there. So that is why the Shastras say aham brahma iti, that I am that very Brahman, nothing else can touch it, which is nirmala. It is immaculate, uncontaminated. So now we can say, okay, I got it. This is all dṛśya, I am drashta, this is the seen, this is not seen. Okay, got it. We can sit here. But for the next 6 verses, the teacher really emphasized to us, do you understand the consequences of this kind of thinking? So this next verse 32, will take up the deha. Then moving forward, we'll take up the other layers as well and go through that negation process to really understand the consequences of saying, I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not the intellect. So with the body, dehānyatvānna, I am other than the body. And so any consequences we see that come from the body does not apply to me. And that list is given to us. janmajarākārśyalayādayaḥ. So when we look at the body, right? I am not a man or a woman. I am not a father or a mother. All of these qualities or qualifications belong to the body. And it can also, and when we talk about the body, it begins with janma. So who was born? I wasn't born, the body was born. It is born from the 5 elements, exists, and then returns upon death back into the 5 elements. So in every stage of our life, from janma to old age, all the way up to death, we identify with every single stage. It is that misidentification that leads to sorrow. That when the hair starts to thin, I start to worry. When the skin starts to form wrinkles, I start to worry. When somebody calls me fat, when somebody calls me thin, when I'm not this or that, I start to worry. I get upset, I get angry, right? Why can't, people let girls pick up stuff? We're strong too, right? That can be a sign of identification with the body. All that has to be removed. Gurudev says, let the body do what it needs to. You remain peaceful, because that is not who you are. They don't belong to you. They belong to the properties of the body. And it even includes all the objects. So when they talk about that last sentence, that śabdādiviṣayaiḥ saṅgah, anything associated with the body, and we're talking about this layer here, objects, anything that can be seen comes from the senses, which belongs to the body. So even that can't bother me, because it is not part of me. So as a last thought here, often people misuse this idea saying, oh, I am not the body. I don't have a mother. I'm not a mother. I'm not a father. And they drop all responsibilities at that point, taking these verses as their pseudo argument, right? It is important to remember when and where these principles apply. That from the highest standpoints, yes, I am not the body, mind, or intellect, but I have not completely understood that yet. So I have to continue to work and carry my responsibilities as is and use that as my sadhana. Can I be objective? Do I have that access and control and discipline over all of my layers, BMI? Because when I do, then I have separated myself a little bit from it. And when I can have complete control over it, then I've started to disidentify with it, have more and more vairagya. And with that, then I have the ability to come to negate it completely, neti, and then establish myself in the highest self as the subject. Then with that pure understanding, then I can say I am not the body, mind, or intellect, and say these responsibilities aren't mine. I'm able to function without attachment. So it's important to remember when and where to use these principles as we move along our sadhana. So with that, Swamiji, that's all I have.
Hari.
Hari Om. So looking at these two shlokas here, whatever siddhantas have been laid out are reiterated here, and we start taking a deeper plunge into the manam aspect of how is this possible? What is the logic that is supporting the principles that have been laid out? So right off the bat in the 31st shloka, we find the statement, dṛśyaṃ ksharam, that anything that is perceived, any perceived object is perishable. Now, what is the link between these two? Something being perceived and something being perishable, that doesn't seem like a logical step in itself. There are lots of intermediary steps we have to consider. So let's go through that process. Anything that is perceived only through my five senses. That's how I get any data, any information about anything in this world. Therefore, my senses only recognize objects with gunas, with attributes. I have this pen in front of me. You can say it's a long pen or a short pen. You can say orange pen, green pen, what is it? Looking at it like this, even all of you through the screen, you can come to certain data points of what its color is, what its size is, all of these things. So it's recognizable only with those attributes. If an entity has our attributes, saguna, that means it has parts to it. If I'm able to pick out certain things in an object, it has parts to it. Anything with parts must perish. Because that is an amalgamation of different things put together, because it's an object that way, it must perish at some point. It cannot always persist. And we've seen before, anything that perishes has no independent existence. Therefore, that which is sat, existence, that which I am, as we've seen before, that can't be me, because these parts, this body that we're talking about, has no independent existence. Now when we see āvidyakaṃ śarīrādi, everything up to this causal body is of that nature. It is a perceived object at all the layers that we look at, therefore I can't be any of these things. Now if we look at it from the standpoint of the koshas then, going up these different layers, even at a more minute level, we find various reasons why. Logically, we can find reasons why these layers are not permanent. And in the case of this shloka, why these layers are perceived. So Annamaya Kosha, we find that it's subject to change and it has parts that can be removed, but that entity can still function. Like there's a human body, you remove an arm or a leg, that's not certain death for the person. The body still does persist, even if parts are removed to it. But it cannot remain forever that way. Even because it's made up of these parts like that, it's subject to change, subject to destruction someday. Pranamaya Kosha, the same thing. It's simply the modification of vayu enters in and out of the body. Nothing is permanent there. That can't be real. Manomaya Kosha, it's an object of cognition. That's something I'm looking at. Intellect sees the emotions in the mind, therefore comes to decisions. So it's an object. Vijnanamaya Kosha, modification of prakriti once again. Though it may be subtle matter, it's matter nonetheless that's going through changes. Anytime I think of an object or I perceive something, my intellect takes the form of that object, constantly undergoing modifications through thoughts. Then Anandamaya Kosha, Vyabhicharitvat is the reason given, that it's not constantly present. And Pujya Gurudev gives the example using avasthatraya prakriya, that when I'm in the state of deep sleep, this Anandamaya Kosha is latent at that point. It's not constantly present. Therefore, that's not permanent either. So in that short statement that's given in the shloka, in the first line even, so much logic goes in there, so much is available for my mananam to reiterate to myself how absurd it is for me to think that I am this body assemblage here. And aham etadvilakṣaṇaṃ, aham brahma nirmalam. This statement right here is so important because it's a two-step process. If I were to merely negate, using just logic, saying that I cannot be this body, I cannot be this mind, I cannot be this intellect. Yes, I do come to the understanding what I am not. But without that assertion of what I am, that assertion that I am Brahman coming from Shastra, that vichara process is not complete. Which is why logic can only get me so far. Tarka is not pradhana when it comes to understanding this truth. Shastra is pradhana. Tarka, nyaya tarka, the logical processes are merely auxiliaries, vehicles to get me to that point. Now, in the next shloka, we find reason given right off the bat again, dehānyatvānna, because I am something other than the body. And that's been established, indicated in the previous shloka. So all of these different modifications that this body goes through, birth, aging, decline, death, all of these are modifications I have to see that happen to an object. And the idea being, for example, if I have a mug or a glass or a jar in my cabinet, sometimes I have to get, standing on something to reach it. It's way up top. I kind of feel for it a little bit. And then invariably I pull a little too hard, it falls over my shoulder and it shatters on the floor. Now, depending on how expensive this mug is, whether my heart shatters or not, that's a different story. But the point here being, when that mug shatters, I don't shatter. And for anyone to think that I would be affected at a body level when that mug shatters, or even emotionally, at any level, dwelling on it too long, we would say that's being absurd, for the very fact that that's an equipment that I have, that's something that is mine, not me. Same idea here, where this inert entity, having so much attachment to it, is the same kind of absurdity as being attached to that mug. Now, one Buddha Paksha can come up here, that despite having no I-ness in this body, this idea of I being this body, that's broken, say, but my-ness can still persist, can't it? Where when a mug breaks, I know I'm not that mug, but it's my mug, therefore I can still have that problem of being shattered myself. If there is no I, where's the question of mine then? If I have that doubt, I haven't fully done my vichara process correctly. Where if there's no I entity that I'm being attached to, what is that my even related to at that point? Which is why elsewhere, Bhagavan Shri Adi Shankaracharya ji very bluntly puts it, for that person who has understood this knowledge, his own body and mind is as connected to him as the body and mind of the person next to him. He says that's the level of understanding to come to. That's where the vichara process must take you if you are to understand this knowledge at all. And then nirindriyatayā, that because I am without the sense organs is the reason given. That's why I have no association, na saṅgo śabdādiviṣayaiḥ, that with the sense objects out there, taste, touch, sound, smell, all of these different sense objects that I'm constantly in contact with, if I'm not the sense organs, those are the ones going out and actually making that effort or even effortlessly connecting with these different objects. Where's the question of having connection with them if I'm not the very medium themselves? Therefore, when we get to that level where it's not just negating different sense objects out there, saying I have no connection to this, not with that, the vichara does not cater to specifically going through different objects and negating them. It says the very tool that's used to connect with them, I'm not that, therefore anything they connect with, that's also negated as having any connection with me. So that's efficient vichara that's done. And providing it this way, we find the Acharya giving various reasons as to why I can't be connected with those. Because sense perception is simply modification of the inner instrument. That when you see this orange pen, whether we realize it or not, your inner instrument is taking the form of this orange pen. That's why you're perceiving it as such. So there's simply modifications, nothing that sticks. The next thought that comes, the mind will change that thought as well. Therefore, something that undergoes so many changes like this, there's no way I can be that. And if I'm not this body assemblage, anything they're connected to without I-ness, there is no minus either. And that's the vichara indicated by these two shlokas here. And finally, again, to reiterate that point, one very subtle thing given here is, yes, this kind of tarka can take me to the understanding of what I'm not, but to assert what I am, Shastra is the only place that gives me that. And that was indicated by aham brahmeti nirmalam in the first verse here. That's all I have, Swami.
So as we proceed into the next two shlokas, these are prakarana granthas, and the prakarana grantha also is a manana grantha. Manana, that which guides us, helps us to contemplate on that which is being studied. The purpose of several such great visionaries or masters is to drill this idea, this concept from different possible angles, different possible standpoints, for our mind, our intellect can grasp these concepts better, so that there is a comprehensiveness. Just like when there is a stamba that has to be fixed in the floor, after having dug a hole, you put that pole and then you throw in good solid rocks and take the crowbar and jam it in, and then fill it up with mud and other aspects. Just when you think that yes, now it is almost done, fixed, somebody who is well known to do this job, they would not just leave it and go. They'll hold that pole and give it a nice shake. If that pole has any room for it to move with that, strong shaking process, you will see that there is gaps there. So you throw in more rocks and jam it nice, thorough inside, so that even if somebody tugs at it, even if there is a strong wind gust that goes by, the pole doesn't land on somebody's head. It stays where it should. Similarly, when these Vedantic thoughts are being given to us, it becomes our responsibility to constantly churn these things for a subtler clarity, a better depth. So, āvidyakaṃ śarīrādi dṛśyaṃ budbudavatkṣaram. It is not to be misunderstood that just because you see it, it becomes seen, therefore it is ksharam. It is not like, what is that fellow's name? Bhasmasura, that the moment he puts his hand and everything becomes bhasma. That I see and suddenly it becomes kshara, perishable. No. That which is seen, seen meaning that which is something other than me. That which is other than me. From where to where? āvidyakaṃ śarīrādi. From the avidya all the way up until sharira and the entire world that can be seen, perceived. The moment you perceive, it means you are the seer, and that which is seen is not the seer. Seer is the only thing that remains consistent and permanent. Anything other than that perishes. Yad-dṛśyaṃ tad-jadam, yad-dṛśyaṃ tat-nashvaram. That which is seen is jada, and therefore it is nashvara. And where does it begin and end? It's very easy, this concept, this idea, to understand when it is with regards to the outside world. Sometimes that also is very difficult. My house, my car, my mug. Just the example that he gave, my mug. My assets, my property, these are outside. But as it is very clearly given in Bhagavad Gita as well, idam shariram kaunteya kshetramityabhidhiyate. All this is called kshetra. 13th chapter, we have seen that. That everything from where? āvidyādahaṃ to the sharira, everything, all of this is nothing but what? All of this is idam, not aham. Now what is this idam and aham? Idam is literally translating this. Aham is the subject. Anything that which I can look at as this, instantly the knower knowing an object as this, we say, I have headache. There's a lot of tadatmyata with that head and the ache that it carries. Say, I have headache. What it actually translates is, I fortunately or unfortunately have a head and that is in pain. Right? We don't say, I am a headache. Because that is not subject. I have hunger. I am not hunger. It is something that I possess, something that I have. So I is something other than that which I have. And that which I have is jada, is not the subject. Now this abhyasa will become strong because people get into these phases. I don't have to sit down and meditate or do any sadhana. I do open eye meditation. Yat yat, dṛśyaṃ, tat tadeva samadhi. Whatever, wherever that is my samadhi. दिल बहलाने के लिए ख्याल अच्छा है. I mean, to pass your time to think that you're doing sadhana, it's a very good thought. But in practicality, in actuality, in order to be able to practice it with that intensity, the buddhi should have a rooting of clarity in it. Otherwise, we slip up so easily and fast. So easily and fast. We know that this is just a wrapper. However beautiful the wrapper be, when a candy is wrapped up and given, or a gift is wrapped and given, how do we pounce on it? Tear open the entire wrapper and then get to the content. Because however beautiful the content, the container or the wrapping be, we know our interest is not in that. There's a whole Japanese school of thought of how it has to be presented. Now you go into those details, how they pack, how they wrap, how they present it. All of that matters. But the person receiving it, yeah, done. Why? That which is inside. Now, similarly, this wrap that we have, sharira, this is the beginning point of our sadhana. Let that be very clear. If we have this deha tādātmyata which has not been addressed, however high that we may want to glide or fly, it is like a hot air balloon which is trying to blow all the hot air in to that balloon. It is nicely fluffed up, nicely floating up, but the basket which is connected to that balloon is firmly pegged in 4 different corners. It will not fly. It will probably burn that material. Therefore, this sharira tādātmyata has to be very clearly understood. Etat na aham. This cannot be me. And it's not just a mere lip service of just repeating this sentence. When any change that happens with respect to this body, I observe and not get carried away. As much as disease is prarabdha, give medicine. That also is its prarabdha. But don't get carried away by it. Recently we were at a meeting and there was this person who was like, "Oh Swamiji, you have become old. Swamiji, you have become old." Swami, in a jest. So there were a couple of other ammas. They said, "Swamiji, this is very disrespectful that a meeting that person should not be." I said, "Amma, how can it become disrespectful? How? Isn't it a fact?" No, but saying it in front of, whether you say it in front of everybody or whether you whisper about it or whether you get onto the rooftop and announce it, the fact still remains a fact. And isn't it true? But how easily we can get carried away. Not just that we get carried away, we are told that it is okay to get carried away. Am I getting across? The abhyasa is not just my foolishness to consider this wrapping as my identity, my very existence, my very being. I am told that that is how it has been, it has to be carried. Yes, the body will have these changes. Asti, jayate, vardhate, viparinamate, apakshiyate, vinashyati, shadvikaravat. We have memorized it. Tattva-bodha on the fingertips. But it is only kantastha, only to be repeatable. When will it become buddhistha? This manana will take us to that level wherein the identity with this body should be that it is a tool, it is an equipment which has to be maintained at its premium for the best utility that it can deliver dharmic way of life. śarīrādi khalu dharma sadhanam. That's it. Beyond that, it doesn't require. That day when I realized after reaching the ashram that my life, at that time it was white, so my life, there'll be no kachpach of what to wear today. White, then it will be yellow, then it will be orange. Now it is orange only. What should I wear? How should it is very simple if you put it in one box of utility and understand that that is where it stands. Now once that disidentification becomes stronger and stronger and I see the vairagya towards it, that buddhi now has space within. Otherwise, constantly, where is that buddhi? Into that wretched aspect of the identity with this body, mind and intellect. The vairagya, because of that viveka, vairagya cannot be something that can be acted. You fake it until you make it. No, that ain't gonna work here. If you are going to fake it, you are going to remain only a fake. Because the clarity is the one that has to drive, and clarity comes only when there is viveka. So viveka janya vairagya, when it becomes strong, then what happens? Because the buddhi now understands, etadvilakṣaṇaṃ aham asmi. I am something completely other than it. Then what am I? Brahmeti nirmalam. What does this vilakṣaṇam mean? Etadvilakṣaṇaṃ meaning nirmalam nirupadhikam nityam ekam sachidanandakam. I am nirmalam. Again, my favorite shloka of this entire ātmabodha is going to come in next week. The second shloka next week. Nirguno nishkriyo nityaha nirvikalpo niranjanaha nirvikaro nirakaro nityamuktosmi nirmalaha. Oh, what an amazing shloka that is. If you memorize it and constantly work on reminiscing and pounding on these words for its deeper meaning, essence, that shloka is like a never-ending candy. Like, you put it in the side of your mouth and then you that rasa you keep. So when he says here, vilakṣaṇaṃ vidyādahaṃ brahmeti nirmalam. Nirmalam, because it is nirupadhikam. There is no upadhi. Upadhi has mala. I am the one who is observer, because of whose presence the upadhi has any kind of movement. Those movements can happen only because of my presence. And they, because of their ksharatva means perishable. Constantly it is perishable. I think it was on Sunday. Yeah, it was on Sunday. Speaking with the Yuva Kendra group, there I said that even if you take at a very biological order, the body, it seems every single cell in whatever layer format that it is in, it perishes, changes and moves on. Every 7 years there is a new body completely. There is nothing of the old that can ever exist, persist. And still we consider that this is me. I told you the example long time ago that in our house there used to be there still is, not used to be, there still is a cycle which is supposed to have been used by my great grandfather. And what is hilarious about it is the handlebar has changed. The brake, that movable brake part, that has changed. Okay. The tires, both front and back, have changed. The tubes have definitely changed. The spokes, I have changed myself on that cycle. The chain has broken several number of times, so we had to replace the chain. Once the teeth of that wheel in the back, that broke, so we had to change that whole wheel. The mud guard on that, the guard that goes onto the chain so that your dhoti or something doesn't get caught in it, that had been rusted, so we changed that. Pedals have broken, we have changed that. Everything in that, including the seat, the cover, the cushion, everything has changed. But still the claim is that Pardada ne use kiya, my great grandfather's cycle, and we have been. What is constant from then to now to call it is continuing? Just a feel. Otherwise, everything else has changed on it. Similarly, this deha, or not just deha, everything that which can be identified as idam is something that is kshara. And I am that akshara tattva. In the 15th chapter, that is why we say, Uttamah Purushast Paramatmetyudahritaha. That Uttama is the Akshara. And that is my true nature. So continuing, they say, dehānyatvānna name, because I am something other than this body, therefore, all that which this body goes through, the body can be fat, thin, brown, dark, white, whatever, right? Because that is the sharira dharma. Asti, jayate, vardhate, viparinamate, apakshiyate, finally manuryate. It becomes manure in the nature, it becomes manure. So janmajarākārśyalayādayaḥ. All of this happened to this physicality, this body, this is perishable. And I am something dehānyatvāt, being other than vilakṣaṇa, therefore, all these modifications, they do not impact me. And because these do not impact me, śabdādiviṣayaiḥ saṅgah na why nirindriyatayā. Because these indriyas and these modifications of these indriyas and the experience thereof belongs in that particular realm. And that is not something that can impact me. The impact is only at that layer. Then what are you? This is, I am that Nitya Vastu, and that Nitya Vastu which is Brahma eva aham asmi iti, which is, I'm connecting it to the last shloka, Brahma iti nirmalam. Who is that Brahma? Aham. See, to understand that there is Brahman and that Brahman is indisputably unperishable, imperishable, that is one aspect of the logic. But to understand that that Brahman is me, my true nature, that is where realization. Otherwise, just parroting these words is not going to yield. Just repeating that's why the Mahavakya is not a mantra wherein you repeat that mantra as a japa. Aham brahmasmi, aham brahmasmi, aham brahmasmi. That is not a repeatable mantra. That is a thought retention wherein in meditation I retain that thought and remain in that thought. Presently, even to do japa, even while doing japa, say I have to say Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram Om, or Om Namah Shivaya, whichever mantra that you want to do. How many times there is itch or a scratch or a discomfort of the body and we do all kinds of twists and turns? Why? There is no asana siddhi yet. Sthiratva is not there. Suddenly, while you are sitting in the Om, something back, कुछ तो खुजली हो रहा है. खुजली शरीर में नहीं, दिमाग में है. The itch, that disturbance, the mind doesn't allow us to be focused. From there, we have to get to a point where the mind gets into a focal point that it repeats, and many people love to claim, whatever I am doing, namasmarana keeps happening. किसको बेवकूफ बना रहे हैं भैया आप लोग? At any given point of time, there can be only one thought entertained by the mind. Multiple or parallel processing is not how it has been constructed. Either you are doing that or doing this. That's why for most of the time when I used to study, especially in the Vedanta Brahmachari training course, people would be like writing verbatim every single word that is said, notes writing. My point was, if I am writing that notes, then I'm not paying attention. I mean, that is how it was, that if I do not grasp it completely as I'm listening and I'm focused into one or two words here or there, some new word or a new concept mentioned, I quickly mention, I get back to that focal point. But to spend only on that, I found it as a distraction. I mean, it's purely maybe just me, because mind can only function in that one particular field. And to claim that ये भी होगा वो भी होगा, पहले बैठ के ठीक से ढंग से तो कर लो. Like sitting in one position in a given particular disciplined time, we sit down and focus. Once that focal point arises, I've moved from instability because of the mana buddhi chitta to a focal point, and to maintain that consistency for a long period of time, that one thought is repeated, then comes the balancing act. It's just like cycling. Supposing you're learning how to ride on a bicycle. first it is unimaginable, unfathomable that how people can maintain the balance. And that too while the wheels are moving. In fact, we quickly understand that you can maintain the balance only when the vehicle is moving. We used to have a competition back at home where it is slow cycle race. That you have to be the last one crossing the line without falling, without putting your foot down. Very difficult to maintain that balance and slowly going in that direction without falling. It is a constant movement to maintain balance between the centrifugal and the centripetal forces. It is easy. More difficult than that is to ride a uni-wheel. One wheel on which you sit and maintain a balance, and on that one wheel is like japa. On that one wheel, to have slow cycle race and to win it, to be the last one to cross the line, meaning you're standing still on that one particular wheel without any movement, absorbed in that one vichara, one particular thought. And what is that one thought of clarity? Aham Satchidananda Swarupaha Brahma Paramatma Swarupaha Aham Asmi. Now, in this whole shades of different stages that I have given, it feels like very easy to just sit, close your eyes and say, I'm meditating. Do we have that balance? Does the mind have that balance? Or is it constantly being plucked and pulled in all directions of our own attachments, wrong identities? So that has to be understood. And what is the criteria? If my buddhi has enough vairagya to understand that I am not this sharira mana buddhi, then śabdādiviṣayaiḥ asaṅgatvat. Things happen. The information data overload happens. Now, such person, will they feel burnt out? If you're a sadhaka, will you feel burnt out because of the vyapara and vyavahara of the organs of perception action in the world outside? If we feel bored, if we feel mechanical, if we feel that we feel burnt out, that means we need to go back, reevaluate our entire sadhana. Why? That can happen only to that one who is still identified with the system. I mean, if you are identified and these things are going, please cater to it. Put some fire extinguisher because the burnout is happening, so that you can recover from it and reapply yourself. Fair enough. But then we have to go back to that reevaluation, that if my vairagya is missing, then my viveka is to be tested. That's stamba nyaya, right? You have to shake it. Why is it on a shaky platform? Which aspect of it is on a shaky platform? Go fill in 2 more stones. Go fill in 2 more vichara there. Nicely, jam it up. Because without clarity of viveka, there cannot be vairagya. Without vairagya, there is no sthiratva. Without sthiratva, there cannot be atmanistha, abidance in my own true nature. And who is the biggest stumbling block? I, me, myself. My own wrong identities. Now, once this is filtered out, I am not distracted by them. Then such seeker, in their complete total awareness, when they sit in that abidance, what is it that abidance means? That we will see in our next 2 shlokas. Perfect. So we'll continue it next week. Stay safe. See you all in the next satsang. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Take care everyone. Hari Om.